For 10 years, the girl lived in total darkness. Every specialist said the same thing. One ray of sunlight will destroy her mind. Her father spent millions, built a fortress of shadows, and begged doctors to find another way. They all shook their heads. Then a maid did something no one else dared to do. And what she found behind those dark glasses will leave you breathless. Bryant M. Roberts was a billionaire, real estate empires, private islands, more wealth than most nations. But his daughter, Susie, was legally blind, 10 years old, never saw a sunset, never saw her father's face. Bryant tried everything. New York, Berlin, Singapore. Specialists who charged a fortune just to read a chart. They ran tests, simulations, scans. All of them confirmed Dr. Thorne's diagnosis. Optic nerve hypersensitivity, irreversible, lethal. Accept it. That's what they told him. But Bryant couldn't accept it because Susie was his entire world. The guilt of her condition ate him alive. So Bryant kept searching, kept paying, kept praying for a miracle. What he didn't know was that the miracle wasn't coming from a medical board. It was coming from the woman he just hired to scrub his toilets.
Hey there, welcome back. If you're new and you're ready to enjoy this story, click subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Also, do check back tomorrow, because I will be giving you another story even more interesting with crazier twists than this one, and you don't want to miss it. Now, let's get back to the story.
Sherry Edwards stood at the imposing iron gates of the Roberts estate, clutching her worn leather bag with white-knuckled hands. The sky above Virginia was a bruising charcoal, matching the mood that hung over the property. Rain began to spit, cold and sharp, but Sherry didn't open her umbrella. She was too busy trying to steady her breathing. The sheer scale of the estate was intimidating, a fortress of wealth that seemed designed to keep people like her out. This was it, her last shot. 3 months ago, Sherry had been a respected ER nurse at St. Jude's. She was the one doctors called when they couldn't find a vein, the one who stayed late to hold the hand of a dying patient. But then came the incident. A wealthy donor's son had been brought in with an overdose. The protocol was clear, but the administration wanted it hushed up. Sherry had refused to falsify the intake time to save the family's reputation. The result? A fabricated negligence complaint, a revoked license, and a career in ashes. She had stood before the board, pleading her case, but money spoke louder than truth. Now, the bills were suffocating her. Her landlord, a man with as much empathy as a parking meter, had taped an eviction notice to her door that morning. 2 weeks. That's what the bold red letters said. If she didn't come up with the back rent, she and her meager belongings would be on the street. The panic was a cold knot in her stomach, tightening with every passing hour. Sherry swallowed her pride. It tasted like ash. She had gone from saving lives to applying to dust shelves, but she needed the money. The agency said the pay at the Roberts estate was triple the standard rate, mostly because nobody lasted more than a month. The turnover was legendary. Rumors of a crazy billionaire and a cursed child circulated among the agency staff, but Sherry couldn't afford to believe in ghosts. She could only afford to believe in rent checks. She buzzed the intercom. Sherry Edwards, here for the interview. The gate clicked open with a heavy mechanical groan. As she walked the long, winding driveway, the house seemed to grow larger, looming over her like a predator. There was no sign of life in the windows, no movement, just stone and silence. The front door was opened by a woman who looked like she had been carved out of granite. Mrs. Holloway, the head housekeeper, wore a stiff black uniform and an expression that suggested she smelled something rotting. "You're Edwards?" Holloway asked, her voice clipping the air. "Yes, ma'am." Sherry wiped her wet shoes on the mat, trying to look presentable despite the rain. "You're late, by 2 minutes. The bus schedule. Mr. Roberts does not care about bus schedules. He cares about discretion and silence." Holloway stepped back, allowing Sherry to enter the foyer. The transition was jarring. It was like stepping into a cave. The air was cool and stale, smelling of lemon polish and dust. The lighting was so dim that Sherry had to blink to adjust her eyes. It felt less like a home and more like a high-end funeral parlor. "You have nursing experience," Holloway said, glancing at the clipboard in her hand. It wasn't a question. It was an accusation. "I do," Sherry said, standing a little taller. 10 years in emergency medicine. "We didn't hire you to be a nurse," Holloway snapped, snapping the clipboard shut. "We hired a maid. You will clean. You will scrub. You will be invisible. Is that clear?" "Crystal," Sherry lied. She felt a pang of loss for her old life, but she pushed it down. Good, because if you step out of line, you won't just be fired, you'll be blacklisted from every domestic agency on the East Coast. Mr. Roberts has. Reach. Mrs. Halloway led Sherry deeper into the mansion, her heels clicking on the marble floors like a countdown. The tour was a blur of shadowed rooms and hushed instructions. Polish the silver in the dark. Vacuum only when the family is out. Never open a curtain, under penalty of immediate termination. Mr. Roberts is a man of particular habits, Halloway explained as they passed a grand dining room that looked like it hadn't been used in a century. He requires absolute darkness. The lighting system is automated. Do not touch the panels. Sherry looked around, her medical training kicking in despite herself. It's a tripping hazard, she murmured, especially for the elderly or the vision impaired. Halloway stopped dead and turned. You are not here to assess safety protocols, Edwards. You are here to clean. They reached the second floor, the air growing even heavier. Halloway stopped in front of a pair of double doors. This is the East Wing. Miss Susie's quarters. She lowered her voice, not out of respect, but out of fear. Mr. Roberts has one golden rule. Listen closely, because I will not repeat it. Halloway stepped into Sherry's personal space, her eyes narrowing. You never, under any circumstances, touch Miss Susie. Specifically, you never touch her glasses. The light hurts her. It causes her excruciating pain. Do you understand? Sherry nodded slowly. I understand. Is she entirely blind? That is not your concern. The last maid tried to adjust the frames because she thought they were crooked. She was escorted out by security in 10 minutes. Don't be a hero, Edwards. Just do the job. Sherry swallowed hard. I'm just here to clean. Ma'am. Good. Follow me. As they walked down the hall, Sherry couldn't help analyzing the environment. The atmosphere was oppressive, heavy with a sense of impending doom. It felt like a hospice ward, where everyone knows the patient isn't making it, but no one is allowed to say it out loud. And then she saw her. Susie was sitting on a velvet ottoman in the middle of the hallway, listening to an audiobook on a tablet, with the screen brightness turned to 0. She was small for 10, pale as a porcelain doll that had been kept in a box too long. She wore a simple blue dress, her hands folded neatly in her lap. But what dominated her face were the glasses. They were monstrous, thick, black, wraparound frames that looked more like welding goggles than eyewear. But as Sherry looked closer, she noticed they seemed too large for the child's delicate face. They rested heavily on her cheeks, looking uncomfortable and terrifying. Sherry watched as the girl shifted, scratching her nose. The movement caused the heavy, ill-fitting glasses to slide down the bridge of her nose just a fraction of an inch. A tiny sliver of the girl's face was exposed to the dim hallway light. Sherry froze. She expected the girl to scream. She expected the excruciating pain Halloway had warned about. But Susie didn't wince. She didn't cry out. Instead, Susie's head tilted. Sherry stopped walking, blending into the shadows near a large potted fern. She watched. Her breath hitched in her throat. Susie was perfectly still, her head cocked at an angle. The glasses had slipped down just enough to reveal her eyes over the top rim. In the dim light of the hallway, a single dust mote floated through the air, catching the faint glow from a distant sconce. Susie's eyes, bright blue and seemingly focused, tracked the dust mote. Her pupil constricted slightly as she followed its path from left to right. Sherry's heart missed a beat. She's tracking. That wasn't the movement of a blind child. A blind child listens. They tilt their ears toward sound. They don't track silent, floating objects with their eyes, and it certainly wasn't the reaction of a child with optic nerve hypersensitivity. If light caused seizures or pain, Susie should be on the floor, convulsing or screaming. But she looked curious. She looked hungry for the sight. Susie quickly pushed the glasses back up her nose, sighing as the world went dark again. She slumped back onto the ottoman, the moment over. Sherry hurried to catch up with Mrs. Halloway, her mind racing. Something is wrong here. Over the next few days, Sherry worked like a ghost. She polished silver, scrubbed marble, and vacuumed heavy rugs. She kept her head down, saying yes, ma'am, and no, sir, to the empty air. But she couldn't stop watching Susie. Every afternoon, it was the same routine. Susie sat in the shadows, afraid to move, afraid to live. Her world was small, contained, safe. The other staff treated her like she was made of radioactive glass, terrified that a beam of light from a cracked door would strike her down. They whispered in the kitchen that the girl was cursed, that her eyes were too sensitive for this world. Medical tragedy, the cook called it. shaking her head while chopping onions. But Sherry saw something different. She saw a child who was being conditioned. She noticed the small things, the way Susie moved with confidence when she thought no one was looking, only to freeze and shuffle when she heard footsteps, the way she would tilt her head toward the window, even though the curtains were drawn, as if she could feel the warmth of the sun and desperately wanted to see it. The nurse in Sherry was waking up. The part of her that read charts, checked vitals, and questioned diagnoses was screaming that the math didn't add up. Why would a specialist prescribe heavy, light-blocking goggles for a condition that typically required medication and gradual desensitization? Why was the house kept dark if the glasses were 100% effective? It was overkill. It was theater. Sherry knew she should just do her job. She had bills to pay. She was one paycheck away from homelessness. But she also knew she couldn't watch a child suffer for a lie. The incident that confirmed Sherry's suspicions happened on a Thursday. Sherry was dusting the grand hallway, working near a large, precarious vase that sat on a pedestal. Susie was nearby, walking slowly along the wall, trailing her hand against the wallpaper for guidance. As she moved, the heavy glasses slid down her small nose again, resting low on her cheeks. Sherry, distracted by watching the girl, bumped the pedestal with her hip. The vase, a heavy porcelain thing worth more than Sherry made in a year, tipped. It began to fall. It fell silently at first, slicing through the air. Susie, who was 5 feet away, turned. She didn't turn her ear. She turned her head. Looking right over the rim of the slipped glasses, her eyes locked onto the movement. With a speed that shouldn't have been possible for a blind child, she lunged. Her hand shot out, not groping in the darkness, but targeting the exact trajectory of the falling object. She caught the vase inches from the floor. Sherry gasped. The sound echoed in the quiet hall. Susie froze, holding the vase. She realized what she had done. She realized she had been seen. Panic flooded her small face. She dropped the vase. Crash. The porcelain shattered into 1,000 pieces. Susie scrambled back, shoving the glasses back up her nose and pressing herself against the wall, pulling her knees to her chest. "I didn't mean to. I didn't see it. I promise I didn't see it." She was reciting a script. "I didn't see it." Mrs. Halloway appeared at the top of the stairs instantly. "What happened? Who broke that?" Sherry looked at Susie. The girl was trembling, terrified not of the broken vase, but of being caught seeing. "I did it," Sherry called out, stepping forward. "I bumped it with the duster. I'm so sorry, Mrs. Halloway. It was my clumsiness." Susie stopped crying. She peeked at Sherry through the black lenses of her goggles, confusion radiating off her. Why would the maid lie for her? Halloway stormed down the stairs, face purple with rage. "That vase was from the Ming Dynasty, Edwards. It will come out of your pay. If there's any pay left after I speak to Mr. Roberts." "I understand," Sherry said, keeping her eyes on Susie. "It won't happen again." That night, as she lay in her small servant's quarters, Sherry couldn't sleep. She replayed the moment over and over. Susie had seen the vase fall. She had reacted visually. The glasses were supposed to block out everything, yet she saw over them. Sherry realized then that the Solaris syndrome wasn't just a misdiagnosis. It was a fraud. Someone was keeping this child in the dark on purpose, and the architect of that darkness was coming to visit the next day. Friday brought rain, and Dr. Kalen Thorne. Sherry was polishing the banister on the landing when the doctor arrived. He was a tall man, impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit that cost more than Sherry's life savings. He didn't carry a medical bag. He carried a leather briefcase that looked like it held contracts, not stethoscopes. He met Bryant Roberts in the hallway. Sherry slowed her polishing, straining to hear. "The sensitivity is increasing, Bryant," Thorne was saying, his voice grave. "I've reviewed the latest telemetry from the glasses. Her optic nerve is fraying. We need to upgrade to the Mark IV lenses immediately." "Upgrade?" Bryant looked exhausted, dark circles under his eyes. "But we just bought the Mark IIIs. You said those would stabilize her." "The disease is aggressive," Thorne sighed, placing a comforting hand on Bryant's shoulder. "I know it's expensive, another $75,000. But can you put a price on Susie's life?" "No," Bryant whispered, defeated. "Of course not. Do it. Whatever it takes." "Excellent," Thorne said, smoothing his tie. "I'll prepare the units and the paperwork for tomorrow. We shouldn't waste a moment." Sherry felt a surge of nausea. It was a sales pitch. It wasn't medicine. It was extortion. Later that afternoon, while Susie was napping and Thorne was with Bryant in the study, Sherry saw it. The doctor had left his briefcase unlocked and unattended on a side table in the hall while he went to the restroom. Sherry checked the hall. Empty. She moved fast. She flipped the latches, reached into the case, and lifted the glasses nestled in the foam. They were labeled Mark IV Prototype. They were heavy, unnaturally so. She brought them up to her face and put them on. The world vanished. It wasn't just dark. It was disorienting. The lenses were thick, warped glass, designed to distort light, not block it. It was like looking through the bottom of a murky beer bottle painted black. Shapes were twisted. Depth perception was destroyed. Wearing these didn't protect you from light. They made you legally blind by obstruction. They were a prison for the eyes. She took them off, her hands shaking with rage. These weren't medical devices. They were blindfolds designed to keep a healthy child dependent on a doctor who was milking her father for millions. "What are you doing?" Sherry spun around. Susie was standing in the doorway of her bedroom, looking small and frightened. Sherry quickly put the glasses back in the case and snapped it shut. She walked over to the girl and knelt down. "Susie, honey, I need to ask you something. And I need you to be brave." Susie tilted her head. "Are you the lady who broke the vase?" "Yes, I'm Sherry." "Susie, do your eyes really hurt when you take the glasses off?" Susie hesitated. She looked toward the stairs, afraid. "Dr. Thorne says they do. He says the light burns my brain. But do you feel it?" Sherry pressed. "When they slipped yesterday. Did it hurt?" Susie whispered, barely audible. "No, it looked bright. And pretty." Sherry closed her eyes. It was confirmed. A 10-year crime. Sherry knew she was running out of time. Dr. Thorne was pressing for the upgrade, which likely meant even heavier, more restrictive glasses. If they put those on Susie, she might never get them off. She had to act. But who would believe her? She was a disgraced nurse, a maid. Thorne was a renowned specialist. Bryant Roberts was a grieving father terrified of killing his daughter. If she went to Bryant with a theory, he'd fire her. If she went to the police, Thorne would produce fake medical records. She needed proof. Irrefutable, undeniable proof. She needed Bryant to see the truth with his own eyes. The opportunity came the next morning. It was Saturday. Dr. Thorne had left, but he was scheduled to return in the evening with the new glasses. Mrs. Halloway was in the kitchen, supervising a delivery. Bryant was in his study, as always. Susie was in the main hallway, sitting on the floor, running her hands over the raised patterns of the rug. Sherry walked up to her. Her heart was hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She was about to break the golden rule. She was about to commit assault in the eyes of her employer. She was about to lose her job, and maybe her freedom. But she looked at Susie, a healthy girl imprisoned in darkness for profit, and she knew she couldn't walk away. "Susie," Sherry said softly. The girl looked up, her face obscured by the black plastic mask. "Sherry, I want to show you something," Sherry said. "But you have to trust me. I'm not allowed to take them off," Susie recited automatically. "Daddy says I'll die." "You won't die," Sherry said, her voice trembling but firm. "I promise you. You're strong. Your eyes are strong." Sherry heard footsteps upstairs. Bryant's study door opened. He was coming out to get coffee. It was now or never. Sherry knelt in front of Susie. She reached out her hands. "Susie, look at me." Sherry grabbed the edges of the heavy black frames. "No," Susie gasped, reaching up to stop her. "Please, the light." "Trust me," Sherry whispered. Sherry pulled. The heavy frames came away easily, no longer weighing down the girl's small face. Susie squeezed her eyes shut immediately, burying her face in her hands. It burns," she screamed. It was a phantom pain, a learned response. "What are you doing?" The roar came from the top of the stairs. Bryant M. Roberts stood on the landing, coffee cup in hand. He dropped it. It shattered, splashing hot liquid across the expensive carpet. His face went white as a sheet. "Get away from her," Bryant bellowed, rushing down the stairs, taking them two at a time. "You're killing her. Security, security." Sherry stood her ground. She didn't let go of the glasses. She blocked Bryant's path to the girl. "Mr. Roberts, stop," Sherry shouted. "Look at her. Just look at her. You're fired." Bryant reached for her, his eyes wild with panic. "Get out of my house. You've murdered her." Two security guards burst in from the side entrance, hands on their holsters. "Sir, arrest her," Bryant pointed at Sherry. Then he fell to his knees beside his daughter, trying to cover her face with his hands. "Susie, baby, keep them closed. Daddy's here. I'll get the doctor." "No!" Susie pushed his hands away. The force of her shove surprised him. Bryant froze. Susie wasn't seizing. She wasn't foaming at the mouth. She was blinking. The hallway was dim, but to a girl who had lived in pitch blackness for a decade, it was dazzling. She blinked rapidly, tears streaming down her face, not from pain, but from the sheer intensity of input. She looked at her hands. She wiggled her fingers. She gasped, a sound of pure wonder. Susie stared at the rug. "Red. It's red." Bryant stopped breathing. He looked at his daughter. He looked at the glasses in Sherry's hand, thick, distorted, cruel. Then he looked back at Susie. Susie slowly lifted her head. She looked at the man kneeling in front of her. She studied his face, the gray in his beard, the lines of worry etched into his forehead, the tears welling in his terrified eyes. She reached out a trembling hand and touched his cheek. "Daddy," she whispered, her voice breaking. You look sad." Bryant's knees hit the floor. The air left the room. "Susie?" he choked out. You can see me?" "I can see you," she said, a smile breaking through her tears. "I can see everything." The silence that followed was louder than any scream. Bryant Roberts, the man who controlled empires, collapsed forward, sobbing into his daughter's shoulder. Susie held him, looking around the room with wide, hungry eyes, drinking in the sight of the chandelier, the wallpaper, the horrified security guards. Sherry stood back, tears streaming down her own face. She dropped the glasses. They hit the floor with a heavy, plastic clunk. "She was never sick, Mr. Roberts," Sherry said softly. "Dr. Thorne, he made her blind, to keep you paying." Bryant looked up. The grief in his eyes vanished, replaced by a cold, terrifying fury. He looked at the glasses on the floor. He picked them up, feeling the weight, seeing the distortion. He realized in a second that he had paid a man millions to torture his child. "Security," Bryant said, his voice low and dangerous. "Yes, sir. Shall we take the maid?" "No." Bryant stood up, helping Susie to her feet. He looked at Sherry, then back at his daughter. "Call the police. Tell them to park around the service entrance so they aren't seen. And then call Dr. Thorne. Tell him I'm ready to sign the check for the upgrade. Tell him to come now." He turned to Sherry and Susie. "Come with me to the library. We have a guest to prepare for." An hour later, Dr. Thorne walked into the library, a smile on his face, expecting a check. Outside, the week-long storm had finally broken, leaving a bright, wash-clean morning, though the library remained dim. He placed his briefcase on the desk. With a confident click, he flipped the latches and threw the lid open to retrieve the contract. In doing so, he displayed the contents to the entire room. Bryant signaled the waiting officers who stepped out from behind the bookshelves. "What is the meaning of this?" Thorne stammered, his face flushing red with indignation. He backed away as the officers moved in. "Bryant, this is a mistake." "It's no mistake," a small voice said. Thorne froze. The high-backed executive chair behind the desk swiveled around. Susie sat there, wearing a bright yellow dress, her eyes clear and focused, no glasses in sight. She looked right at him. "And I like your red tie, Dr. Thorne," she said clearly. "It matches your face." The open briefcase sat on the desk, exposing its contents for all to see. The new contract, the falsified medical charts, and the Mark IV prototypes, visibly nothing more than crude, heavy chunks of darkened glass with zero medical components. The fraud was undeniably low-tech and cruel. Thorne was marched out in handcuffs, his protests silenced by the girl who saw right through him. Sherry sat in the kitchen, her hands wrapping around a mug of hot tea. She was shaking, the adrenaline finally wearing off. She wasn't sure what would happen next. The crisis was over, but she was still just a maid who had disrupted the order of the house. In places like this, even heroes got let go to avoid scandal. Mrs. Halloway walked in. The housekeeper looked different, softer. She placed an envelope on the table. "Severance?" Sherry asked, her heart sinking. "Bonus," Halloway said. "And a contract. Mr. Roberts fired the entire medical staff. He needs someone to manage Susie's rehabilitation, and he has his legal team working on getting your license reinstated. He says he won't stop until your record is clean." Sherry looked at the envelope. Tears welled in her eyes. It was more than enough to pay her rent. It was a new life. "Come," Halloway said. "They're waiting for you." Sherry walked into the grand hallway. Bryant was standing by the massive front doors. Susie was beside him, wearing normal sunglasses, holding his hand. "Sherry," Bryant said. He didn't look like a billionaire. He looked like a man who had just been given his life back. "We were waiting for you." "For what, sir?" Bryant turned to the heavy velvet curtains that had shrouded the windows for 10 years. He nodded to Sherry. "Do the honors." Sherry walked to the window. She grabbed the heavy fabric. With a sharp, tearing sound, she ripped the heavy-duty Velcro seals apart and threw the curtains open. Sunlight, brilliant, golden, unfiltered sunlight flooded the room. It hit the dust motes, turning them into dancing diamonds. Susie gasped. She stepped forward into the beam of light. She didn't burn. She didn't break. She just closed her eyes, tilted her head back, and felt the warmth on her face for the first time in her life. "It's warm," Susie whispered. Bryant looked at Sherry. "Thank you," Sherry smiled, the weight of the last few months lifting off her shoulders. "You're welcome, Mr. Roberts." The darkness was gone. The house was full of light, and finally, Susie could see the flowers in the garden.
Hey there, if you've made it to the end and haven't subscribed yet, this is the perfect time to become part of this family. Also, do tell me in the comments what struck you most about the story. What was the greatest lesson it left you? I try to read all the comments, and I love knowing how these stories move you. Finally, I just want to say, thank you so much for being here. If you enjoyed it, you will surely love the next one. It's as crazy and even more intriguing than you can ever imagine. So do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one.